Welcome, everyone, to the Defenders podcast by Phantastic Geek, the official, unofficial voice of the Marvel Cinematic Community. My name is Matt, and joining me, as always, is Pete. Hello, Pete.
Hello, Matt. Hello, everybody. And while this is the Defenders podcast by Phantastic Geek, you are listening to this on the Daredevil feed. You are listening to this on the Jessica Jones feed. You are able to hear this on the Luke Cage feed and also our Iron Fist feed, because today we're talking about the path that these four heroes have taken to wind up at this dream team up 8-episode series.
Yeah, we discussed back and forth, where do we drop this, and certainly if you've enjoyed us on any of those feeder series, or if you've enjoyed us on the Defenders feed, heck, maybe you love everything that Phantastic Geek does, and you're listening on the Pop Culture Podcast feed. This is it, Pete. This is what has been planned since, I believe, November 2013. Heck, if you go back even farther to the development that went on for the Jessica Jones series, originally for ABC, then possibly for ABC Family. It's all come down to this, the larger connections. And here we are, Pete. In about 1 week, it drops.
I've seen the first 4 episodes. I can't wait to get through the rest. And it's definitely been an earned situation. We've had 5 seasons of television to arrive here.
Buzz from the entertainment press has been, I'd say it has gone from pretty good to good. Pete, I'm not expecting necessarily in these 8 episodes to do a dive deep on disability, on Catholicism, on gender, on race, on what it's like being a super rich white guy like Danny Rand is. I'm expecting all our friends, not just those 4 friends, all the friends that we've met in Marvel Netflix to come along, whether they're goodies, whether they're baddies. I'm expecting callbacks. I'm expecting good fights. I'm expecting, Pete, at the end of it, good guys to have won, a sense of, a certain sense of finality here. I'm expecting a rollicking good time at the movies, at home on Netflix.
I think in addition to our main characters, the thing that makes this such a unique miniseries, outing, whatever we're going to refer to this, is that we kind of get the greatest hits of supporting characters that go along with all of these characters as well. And that's really fun, in addition to Sigourney Weaver. So again, props to them for having the vision, to seeing it through, and now we benefit from it on Netflix.
It'll be interesting to see how things go down in the course of 8 episodes. I'm always mindful of how the first season of Daredevil, so much was right. For me, the pace was just a little too slow, and none of the subsequent seasons of any of the Marvel Netflix shows have had that particular pace to it. And now you multiply it by, these many more leads, by potentially not just Sigourney Weaver, but what other baddies might come along the way. All the supporting characters that are going to be in Defenders. To me, I'm expecting the pace that we saw at the beginning of Daredevil Season 2, where things are just flying, as opposed to the slightly more kind of ponderous and reflective look that we got back when this thing started.
Well, again, I've not seen all 8 episodes, but I can tell you from the way it's set up, it seems to occur over a much smaller span of time.
Well, Pete, let's go through, just kind of remind everybody where things are up to with these characters. Of course, when we last left the Daredevil portion of the story, we had dove even deeper into the mystery of the hand. We got one appearance of Madame Gao in season 2, which feels like forever ago since she's shown up in Iron Fist. And there was that question of the giant hole in Midtown.
Yeah, it's funny to think that we've had 26 episodes of Daredevil. It seems like it's been a long time since we first saw these the villains, the Russians, the Japanese, the Chinese. the guy who they wouldn't name for the better part of the first several episodes. And, by the time that they were digging that hole in the middle part of the second season, and the Hand had this much larger plan, there, I think, was a very direct trajectory into the Defenders.
It is astonishing to think that we got Daredevil in 2015, we got Daredevil in 2016, and then by way of Defenders, we're getting Daredevil in 2017. I in no way would have said that we've had new Daredevil on TV each year for the past 3 years. It feels like forever ago.
It does, and I don't exactly know why that seems to be the case. I mean, again, we're on every Marvel Cinematic Universe TV show, so maybe it's just the breadth of content with these 8 episodes, Matt. They're going to be up to 192 hours of Marvel TV that's aired. And then once we get all 8 Inhumans, we're going to hit 200 exactly.
Wow. Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Why? Since let's see, Daredevil, the last that second season was released on March 18th, 2016. Probably was late April by the time we finished that up, podcast wise. So since then, we've had what, a season and a quarter of Agents of Shield. We've had Jessica Jones. We've had Luke Cage. We've had Iron Fist. We've had all this great TV. So that's why it feels like forever since A Cold Day in Hell's Kitchen aired all the way back in the late winter of 2016.
Absolutely. And, you think of the growth that's gone on with Daredevil and his world in particular in Hell's Kitchen since then. Feels like he went up the ladder as the Man in Black through each of those threats, beginning first with the Russians and then moving on to Mr. Nobu. And then, a little bit of involvement with Madame Gao, more so with the financial end, Leland, and then of course you have Wesley helping out Fisk. Wesley's murdered by Karen Page, albeit in self-defense, and really, there's while there's good and evil, and there's that great speech by Fisk about being the ill intent, and the biblical end of it before we finally get to the showdown and we get Daredevil in the suit. Um, Fisk greatly believes he's the hero of his own story, and this relationship he's begun with Vanessa and protecting her after the attempt on her life by Leland and the members of the group there. Just a lot of great intrigue and an excellent, I felt, first entry for Marvel on Netflix.
It's worth keeping in mind too that the quality of Daredevil through its first 2 seasons is, I dare say, in spite of the some of the showrunner drama that went on behind the scenes. It initially was put together by Drew Goddard, who then left Pete because he was going to make his fortune with the Spider-Man 3 spin-offs that Sony was going to do there with the Spider-Man before the Spider-Man we have now. So he
And
left.
what a bummer, man, that the guy leaves for that, and then the hack fallout and everything that allowed Sony to make the movie with Marvel for Spider-Man, and now the guy could have been continuing to run this, and yeah, is not.
Them's the break in the biz. That's the business part of show business. But then most of season 1, showrun by Stephen DeKnight, who was I think did a wonderful job, but was clearly brought in to run season 1 and not to necessarily, kind of carry things on from there. Season 2 showrun by Douglas Petrie and Marco Ramirez, who were tapped to do Defenders, and then Petrie left right before Defenders started. So it's like, again, all this kind of showrunner drama. Still, at the end of the day, Jeff Loeb is making sure that there's a steady hand on the tiller here for Daredevil and then for Defenders, and it's full speed ahead.
Absolutely. And by the time we returned to Daredevil in season two, there's that great chase scene that begins that ends in the church. Obviously, these characters are in a much different place. Things almost seem to be going too well. And then, of course, you throw Frank Castle into the mix, taking out the various gangs, and the arcs that occur there between the Punisher stuff, which then segues once he's caught into the Elektra stuff, and then weaving back together in the third part of those 13 episodes, really bringing us to. I mean, if there's one I think that's must watch, it's Daredevil, for the reason that they bring so many of the characters, it seems, are going to be a big part of the Defenders, whether it's Matt Murdock, whether it's Foggy, whether it is Karen Page. Marvel's already thrown it out there, so I'll talk about Frank Castle again. So many of them seem to come from there, more so than the other series. And it's, if Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the mothership for the Marvel Cinematic, you know, TV universe, Daredevil is that for the Netflix side.
And to add to what season two does, Elektra, you have a deeper understanding of the Hand. At the time, well, obviously season two ends with some questions. What's the Hand up to? What exactly is the depth of their operation? So on and so forth. What's with these urns? What's with the blood collecting? Only to discover, well, by the time we got to Iron Fist, which had its own deficiencies, which we discussed in depth in the Iron Fist podcast, but that picked up and went even deeper on the mythology of the Hand and all that they were doing. Really, in retrospect, a really elegant story handoff. Again, some execution issues for Iron Fist, but in terms of setting up, at least what I, Pete, in my spoiler-free existence, what I can only assume is some sort of, whether it's entirely the Hand or Hand plus another group, whatever it might be, all
The
that we,
thumb.
the thumb, that's right, the foot. Pete, it's the Foot Clan, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles come at the end, and you say, what? That's the big surprise. Anyhow, just this idea that we've had all this mythology and all this setup to earn a Defenders miniseries. Pete, not to seed it in one movie and then say, now go see Justice League. Oh, sorry, that's the other universe. But I digress.
Yeah, and so when we get to Jessica Jones, and just a wonderful memory, I think, for both of us, being at New York Comic Con in October of 2015, and hey, all right, so Jessica Jones is coming, and we're going to show you the first episode right now. And to get the Daredevil end of that universe, and then to see it fleshed out with a different character in the same island of Manhattan, with a different tone, and just such a raw and real portrayal by Christian Ritter of Jessica Jones, I think really upped the ante as far as what we could do dramatically with these shows that maybe you couldn't do on regular broadcast TV. Not to say that they don't do a great job dramatically. I picked a fight with the USA Today TV critic the other day, who said that Marvel doesn't seem to understand that their ABC shows are terrible. They're not. You're terrible. And then I saw that Matt, of course, took a swipe as well.
As did, I don't know, I think much of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Twitter intersection that Phantastic Geek has. They were replying to the guy. They were favoriting my tweet. They were retweeting other people's tweets. I can only imagine that guy, he didn't like it, Pete, because how dare the little people tell a critic what's what. But yeah, wonderful stuff going on for Marvel ABC, wonderful stuff going on for Marvel Netflix, and I continue to come back to Jessica Jones as my favorite of the Marvel Netflix bunch. And I've explored why, because it's not like, gee whiz, Pete, I had fun in those 13 episodes where they explored topics like rape, assault, and PTSD. It's not because of that, and it's not because of that I appreciate the character. It's her tenacity and her ability to bounce back, and her ability to, whether in this day and age you want to call it, resist, whether you want to call it fight back, whether you want to call it insurrection, some of those larger connections there. But there's a there's a sense in Jessica Jones to not forget the past, but to put the past behind you and to start working towards the next thing. Sometimes the next thing is revenge. Sometimes the next thing is getting over the thing in the past. But there's just kind of there's a keep on going attitude that I think is timeless. Maybe nowadays it's a little bit more timely. Get back on the horse and let's go at it again.
I think that that show did such an excellent job with a female hero, and we've seen very little um, of this type of character, particularly as damaged as Jessica Jones is. And, in an era now where there is a DC Wonder Woman movie in the world that is easily the best thing that they've done on that side, Jessica Jones, to me, is the strongest female character we have in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I think you could well be right there, and then there's of course tons and tons of amazing women in the MCU, but
And in this show in particular.
yes, yeah. I mean, you look down the list of fantastic characters there and fantastic actresses. Um, you also said earlier, Pete, this idea that she's damaged. There's that too in so many of these characters. Um, I think of Malcolm's drug addiction, which does not take up a huge portion of the story, but I mean, this more than any of the four, I think, is digging into a variety of social concerns, whether it is some of the PTSD and assault stuff for Jessica Jones herself. Um, certainly some of the drug stuff placed on Malcolm. Even I think of Sergeant Will Simpson, where he's kind of he's almost radicalized by Kilgrave. Again, that's not kind of that's not what the story is actually about. But I think you can take a metaphor for that. Um, just all this pathos, all this heaviness that's in this season.
Yeah, and lest we forget, this was a season of television that was awarded a Peabody, Matt. That's no small accomplishment. And between Jessica Jones, between Trish Walker, between the contributions of Carrie Ann Moss as Jerry Hogarth, and then, a supporting player like Aaron Moriarty, who played Hope, who really, helps to kick off that season with the end of that first episode. Um, I've not gone back and rewatched the entire first season. I have watched various episodes. Um, Mostly I think because of how heavy some of the Kilgrave stuff is, it's not a quick hit. Um, but again, I find her story to perhaps be the richest.
Yeah, and the good news there, filming for season two began this past April, so you figure about 6 months to film, a couple months after that to do post production and whatnot. So, with any luck, we're looking at that March or April range of 2018, which feels a lot closer than it did, back when season one ended before Thanksgiving in 2015. So we're moving right along here with more Jessica Jones.
Then we get into a show like Luke Cage in the very end of September last year, 2016. And from the moment the credits rolled, Matt, the word that came to mind with this show was cool. I have never felt more cool watching a TV show in my entire life.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal season of television. Obviously touches on social concerns similar to the way Jessica Jones does. And I think Pete, for suburban guys like you and me, it brought us into what that felt like and became a familiar place, that of Harlem, that of
Harlem.
the barbershop, the restaurants, the machinations, the this, the that. I mean, it really did a wonderful job pulling people like us who aren't familiar with that walk of life necessarily, pulling us into the world of Luke Cage and his corner of New York.
That first scene in Pops where, they're talking about the Knicks and basketball and just the city and, Harlem as a localized center of culture and sports and all this other stuff. It was just pitch perfect as far as an entry point. And, big props to Chio Hidari Coker bringing a series, I think, that presented problematic production ideas and decisions, and there he produces a show that creates a tagline for TV Guide, the most important show of 2016.
And I mean, you think too, my goodness. Not only do you have Mike Coulter, of course, reprising the role of Luke Cage, but to have Mahershala Ali, who within what 4 or 5 months of Luke Cage
Was
dropping would
an
go on.
Oscar winner. Yeah.
Yeah. Let alone Alfre Woodard, let alone Eric LeRae Harvey, Theo Rossi, Simone Missick, Rosario Dawson. This might be the best top to bottom cast that we have seen for not just Marvel Netflix, maybe Marvel TV period, and that's with big props to the amazing kind of semi occasionally rotating cast on Agents of Shield. I mean, this is top to bottom. These are stellar actors.
It's such an assemblage of talent of people of color. Okay. Missick, I just can't wait for her contributions with Colleen Wing when they get together. That we see her very early in the Defenders, and that she's placed front and center there is just so awesome. And Theo Rossi's a guy that kind of rides under the radar, but what a great character.
He really is that character of Shades, and I was so happy to see him make it through to the end, knowing that he'll be back
Yes.
for I would hope for season two. I mean, heck, for all I know, he might show up next week in Defenders in some capacity. Um, yeah, and you know what else blew me away about this season, and to me personally, I see a direct connection all the way back to that slightly slow first season of Daredevil. The notion that they took this season of Luke Cage and essentially split it in half. I
Yes.
in no way, spoiler alert, kids, if you're listening to the Defenders podcast, hopefully you're up to date with the feeder shows. I in no way thought that established TV star of House of Cards and other things, Mahershala Ali, was going to be killed off halfway through and a new bad guy introduced to be at least your main kind of on foot antagonist for the rest of the season. Completely blew me away. Couldn't believe it. I mean, this is Mahershala Ali has a relationship with Netflix. You figure, hey, it's the perfect guy for the role, and it's all one big happy family here. Totally blown away that we got essentially two half seasons.
Yeah, and I think there's great things done in both the cottonmouth stuff, and particularly the way they make you feel, the pathos for a character who's done terrible things, and seeing, that particular episode manifest when we get to see what he was like. And we had heard the Uncle Pete and the Mama Mabel stuff, and to see those flashbacks, and then, to get the connection with Stryker of having been related to Luke Cage and everything there, the callbacks of the prison story. That's an excellent episode when we get to see how Luke wound up in prison the first time, his creation. We get to see the the goofy exploitation, black exploitation type of outfit that he covers himself after he's out and instantly takes off. And then some of the visual references, particularly um, Stryker's outfit later on, the kind of power suit to retcon that in was really really fun.
And then before we wrap up discussion of Luke Cage, behind the camera, and there have been some phenomenal directors for both Daredevil and Jessica Jones, but to have this wide variety of directors for Luke Cage, Paul McGeegan, who has done some Sherlock, Vincenzo Natali, who has a background in science fiction, Guillermo Navarro, who has an Oscar for best cinematography for Pan's Labyrinth, Phil Abraham, who has done certainly Daredevil, I think maybe an episode of Jessica Jones as well, maybe the best director on TV. I mean, these were class A directors that they got for this season, and I feel like it somehow is tied into just that extra bit that takes us from ordinary to extraordinary for this season.
Well, you say extraordinary, Matt, because we go from there to Iron Fist.
Yeah, and you know what? It's been a good bit of fun seeing as how um, whether it's the Twitter accounts for these four characters where they're kind of razzing Iron Fist a little bit or things of that sort. I mean, what do you say? Iron Fist season one moved the story ball forward for a lot of the hand stuff. I was struck, Pete, listening back to our wrap up for Daredevil season two. All these questions, and we really didn't have an understanding of the hand. I don't mean you and I, of course, we understood things as just about as best as you could, but just where the story left off back at the end of Daredevil season two, how far Iron Fist brought it, some of the great female characters in Iron Fist, but at the end of the day, I put it at the feet of showrunner Scott Buck. Yes, fine. Danny Rand is in an unlikable situation. We're all normal people. He's super rich. Pete, when I went to go get a driver's license, I had to, pursue a driver's license. He just buys an Aston Martin and drives without a driver's license because he's rich. Guess what? That's Bruce Wayne too. People still like Bruce Wayne. That's Tony Stark. People still like Tony Stark. It's up to the showrunner to make it gel, and it didn't.
Yeah, I ran a poll on Twitter with some of the discussion that has happened in the wake of the Inhumans media rollout, which has not gone well at all. And I asked people, who is the biggest villain in the Marvel Cinematic TV universe, and the choices that I provided were Grant Ward from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Fisk from Daredevil, Kilgrave from Jessica Jones, and showrunner Scott Buck. And Scott Buck finished a very close third. Kilgrave won it with 34%. Fisk was second at 27, but Scott Buck was a very close third with 24%, Matt. So I don't know margin of error, but there were 196 votes, and I'm pretty sure he's within the margin of error of being the second biggest villain, at least on this list. We had some other people chiming in with some different villains here, mentioning particularly some of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There's been a lot. You had Garrett, you had Whitehall, you had Malik, you had Ada. But there's a lot of people who seem to think Scott Buck has a big part antagonistically that he's played. This character presented issues same as Luke Cage in terms of, okay, we have a guy who has powers. Luke Cage's, I think, were a little easier to integrate. His world, I talk about the cool factor. They couldn't have hit it out of the park any better in using the club, in using the music in that series. And I was excited when I first got the screener on Iron Fist. We see him walking around. We had seen part of the scene at New York Comic Con last October where he walks in for the first time, and we hear the Outcast song, so fresh and clean, and I'm like, okay, like they're gonna seize on the music too, and we know that he's gonna have this great connection eventually with Luke Cage, and they just never seem to find the footing that any of those other shows seem to find as far as tone. um some of the performances are really uneven. I mean, there's the things you can count on. Rosaria Dawson is in it, and I think she's in it more than any of the other shows, and she's really needed to kind of hold it together. Jessica Hennick is a find. We could tell from the reaction that the cast and crew gave her when we saw them at New York Comic Con that they were really proud of the work they saw her do, and they helped her to do. And again, you don't want to scapegoat Finn Jones, because I think a lot of what went wrong with this series was on the page first.
Well, and when I look at the list of directors, I reached that conclusion too. They're there to direct one episode. Andy Goddard, who did an episode, has done Downton Abbey. Deborah Chow has done Mr. Robot. Kevin Tancharoen arguably has directed the best episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Farron Blackburn has directed two beloved episodes of Doctor Who. Pete, there was even a director this season, new guy on the block, Miguel Sapochnik. He's done apparently some. There's an Irish show, Game of Thrones, that he did the last two episodes of season 6.
Yeah.
There's tremendous talent here. Quite frankly, Pete, the best episode visually of Iron Fist was episode 106, Immortal Emerges from Cave. That's directed by RZA, who I believe at the time, I'm looking quickly now, I believe he had not directed TV before. So full credit to him. Pete, I know you're a big RZA fan. Big
the
credit
the
to
the
him.
Woo stepping up in the last two shows as the culture of them makes it possible. We had Method Man towards the tail end of Luke Cage and the Bulletproof Love stuff, and then you get the RZA here. Maybe we bring the whole Wu-Tang Clan, the existing members back at some point. Maybe that's the end of the Defenders. They battle the Wu-Tang Clan. I don't know. But I think there were a lot of good contributions, but coalescing as a whole, it never happened like it did with some of the those two middle series in particular reached such dramatic and artistic heights that we haven't been back to yet.
And you said these episodes, you just used the phrase, these episodes coalescing. It's not Miguel Sapochnik's job to make episode 5 work with episode 4, which he directed episode 4, or RZA to make sure that he's picked up from episode 5 when he directs episode 6. That is the job of the showrunner who's running the show. And to me, there's this very straight line from the lesser reviews for Iron Fist, the increasing stink cloud over Inhumans, and the fact that Scott Buck will not be back for Iron Fist. To me, these all point in the same direction. I don't mean to overly pile on the guy. I'm sure he's lovely. I know that there's a handful of people who enjoyed his showrun season of Dexter. And it's great that he did some 6 Feet Under. But, I think there's a reason that he's not back. And I guess the best we can hope for, if Daredevil has only improved with the best intentioned showrunner changes, if Scott Buck has kind of been shown the back door, then let's bring in somebody who's going to really jazz things up here. Heck, Pete, I don't know. Let's see here. Jessica Jones and Daredevil improved by people with different perspectives. I'm just going to throw this out here. Why don't we get, there's a lot of Asian influence on Iron Fist, even though the character himself is not Asian. Maybe Asian showrunner. Let's see what Kevin
Right.
Tancharoen is doing. He's done all these great
Right.
episodes. He's got showrunners in the family. whoever it is, let's bring in somebody who's going to do more than let me pound out 13 episodes so I can get you two Defenders.
Yeah, and we speculated at the time when we were podcasting Iron Fist, as Inhumans was ramping up pretty hard, how much of the pivot from Iron Fist to Inhumans, and that both of them being on the lap of Scott Buck, played a role with seemingly both fiascos.
Well, I guess looking ahead now, finally to Defenders, Pete. Now the sun can come out again. I mean, just looking at this list of main characters. Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Elektra, Punisher, Claire Temple, Misty Knight, Karen Page, Colleen Wing, Trish Walker, and there's still more on the list. I mean, I guess, Pete, the best thing that could possibly happen is to make us say, "Hey, the Iron Fist was really good in that Defenders. I can't wait to see more of him," as opposed to kind of how we feel now.
Yeah, it's a great group. I think that to find these types of performers and to bring them all together in a project like this is increasingly rare. And to think how much TV led us to this point, 13 episodes times 5, what are we talking about? 65? Yeah, 65 episodes of TV to arrive at this point for 8 episodes against Sigourney Weaver, Matt. I can't underscore that enough. And being in the room when that was announced for the first time, as we talked with a couple of New York Comic Con organizers within the last 8 weeks, they had no idea that was going to happen.
Which is to the credit of Jeff Loeb and how Marvel TV runs things. It crossed my mind, Pete, as how do we put this? Because of course, A, I always run spoiler free, and B, I would never download something off of YouTube that I thought was going to be copyright flagged shortly. The ease with which one could find the San Diego Comic Con presentation of the Avengers trailer that's out there. Okay. How many times have we been in a Marvel TV panel where they say, "This is not a joke. These are private security guys. They will have night vision goggles. You will be taken out if your phone is out." And not a single phone is out, and no footage ever shows up until they are ready to release it.
Yeah.
That's every time.
Jessica
So
Jones didn't show up.
yeah, not a stitch.
Now, is
Um,
there less demand? There's definitely less demand for the TV stuff than the film stuff. There is no bias. There's no slight in any way when we say that. That being said, people abide by that direction.
so so here we are with a week to go. Pete, let's talk format here. How are we going to be? How are we going to be watching? How are we going to be podcasting?
Well, beginning on Friday, August 18th, we're certainly going to take in that first episode, and we will be bringing you that podcast for that first episode that night. You'll be able to get it that day.
So, Pete, the plan after that is we're looking at Tuesdays and Fridays, releasing episodes from there. I know you got some family stuff going on. I got some family stuff going on. So, certainly that's our goal. Maybe, fingers crossed, Pete, maybe it's at a slightly faster pace than that. But we want to set down the baseline of expectations.
Yeah, check your feeds. Certainly, Tuesdays and Fridays should be the days. You never know when something might pop up a little earlier. And then, there's those Patreon people we're always looking to take care of.
Absolutely. If you are listening to this on the feed for Daredevil or Jessica Jones or Luke Cage or Iron Fist, we're going to be putting those feeds back away until there's further news about those individual seasons. So either hop on to the Defenders feed, or if you love what Phantastic Geek does, there's always the Pop Culture Podcast feed that gets everything, all our shows, all the movies that we go to, little extras and bonuses, Star Trek, Discovery, etc. So, however you listen, we look forward to watching Defenders with you.
Absolutely. It's taken, it seems, such a long time to wind up at this point, but that we're at the precipice of it right now seems almost unbelievable.
We could not have gotten this far without the support of our listeners, particularly our pals on patreon.com/Phantastic Geek. They, and indeed all of you, serve as a reminder for us to keep doing what we're doing. The people like what they hear. And of course, want to give one more bit of extra thanks to our Patreon pals.
Yes, particularly Mary Kirk and the level that she contributes at. Get yourself to patreon.com, Patreon/Phantastic Geek with the PH all one word. Everybody who contributes, it gets exclusive podcast content. And then, of course, you can pick various levels that you're comfortable donating at.
Pete, as Defenders unfolds, how can people be in touch with you to talk about future episodes, stuff you've already seen, to tap into the wisdom of Spoiler Pete?
Wow, easy on the wisdom there. You can find me on Twitter at Peter, Pieterj, Ketelar, Ketelaar, 9,416 followers. Can't be wrong.
And while I am personally on Twitter as Looking Back Lost, you can be in touch with the podcast anytime you want. We are Phantastic Geek. That is Fantastic with the PH. PhantasticGeek.com. You can leave a comment there. You can email fantasticgeek@gmail.com. You can see us on Twitter or Instagram at Phantastic Geek as well. But wait, Pete, there's more.
Facebook.com/Phantastic Geek. Again, one word with the PH. Like it, and all of the stuff we do will show up on your feed.
I'll just mention one more, the least used way in which people get in touch with us. It is, of course, our Google Voice listener line. You can leave a message at 732-707-1815 and let us know what you think of Defenders as you start to dive on in there. And with that, Pete, it is time to start the countdown clock. We are a week away from Defenders finally hitting. It's exciting times indeed. I will say adios to all our listeners and give you, Pete, the final pre-Defenders word.
Come together right